Hello boys and girls, welcome to my channel. I'm for Classic and welcome to BenchART. So for today what I do have in it is Wuchang Fallen Feathers. So this is, I believe, the first game from this developer team. I'm not entirely sure though, but what I do know is that there have been a lot of conflict regarding the optimization of this game on the PC, and that's really the reason why I decided to try it today, just to have an idea how bad optimized this game is. So I'm going to start on with 1080p median settings, but let me just in advance show you something. With the current patch of the game, it says that the game contains forced upscaling, alright, in here, and that you can't play native resolution. I'm not entirely sure about it, but I want to show you something first. So I've noticed some weird behavior with the upscaling. For example, at 4K and using high settings, as you can see, if I push the TSR to the maximum, so essentially it seems that I'm using 4K native, I have 37 frames per second, which seems pretty good. Although if I drop the resolution scaling to 50% of TSR, which is essentially upscaling from 1080p to 4K, I'm also having the same frame rate, which is impossible. Now, although if I drop it to 33, for example, I do have a boost in frame rate. So you might be confused at this point, how does this upscaling in this game work? And that's probably why so many people are confused about this. So how does this work? Each resolution and each setting have a limit for how much upscaling you can use. And as soon as you see the red wording down there, you know that's where the limit goes. So in this case, at ultra settings 4K, it goes until 67% of resolution scaling, and that's why we are having 22 frames per second. Now if I drop to 50, I get 30. So that's how upscaling works. It only works depending on the resolution that you are playing and depending on the preset that you are using. So we are back to the game, this time around 1080p, median settings, 67% of resolution scaling, which is essentially upscaling from 720p to 1080p using TSR. This is a typical setting that I usually use at median settings, so there is nothing new in here. And this is also my recommended way for you to play this game. So what can I tell about performance and graphics, and if this game it is well or bad optimized? Well, it's not very good optimized, but it's not any different than any Unreal Engine 5 out there. So many people have been flagging this game as very bad port, very bad optimized. I can see some bad things in here. The game is very CPU bound, but it's still for the most part above than 60 frames per second. So I'm not seeing a big deal in there. Also, despite the game spends a good amount of time pre-compiling shaders, I still do have stutters. So I'm not entirely sure if those stutters are related with shader compilation stutters or if they are traversal stutters. For that, I would need to see the console version running, because if this is traversal stuttering, that's something that affects both consoles and also the PC. It's not something exclusive to the PC like the shader compilation stutters. So performance is not great, but it's also not terrible. Not great, not terrible. Okay, because at 1080p median settings with 67% of resolution scaling upscaling from TSR, I get for the most part a 60 frames per second experience in here. The only biggest downside I can see is that the stutters. Okay, but I mean that's nothing new when we are playing with Unreal Engine 5. Okay, so yeah. Also, another issue is that the median preset does use low textures, but of course you can adjust to whatever the setting you want. In my opinion, I think you can use extreme, since the RX 6700 XT have enough VRAM to cope with those extreme textures in this game. There isn't really too much of a difference, to be honest, but in quality there is difference. Okay. So that's it for median settings. I would just shut up a little bit and let you enjoy a little bit of the combat. This was my first run of the game in this environment, so I had no idea what the hell I was doing in here. but I will shut up a little bit. Well, I'm back in here, this time around with a three-way split of different other settings. So, for example, in this case, 1080p high settings with 67% of TSR, I'm having about 60 frames per second. On the middle, I have the exact same settings, but with 75% of TSR, which runs very similar for some reason. Okay. And on the right, what I do have, it is 1080p Ultra with 100% TSR. So as you can see, there is all these settings are playable. Okay, all of them does drop from 60 frames per second. Of course, the higher the setting, the more often you can see drops below than 60. Still, my preferred setting, it is still the median settings with 67% of resolution scaling. Because I still saw some drops with the 1080p high settings with 67% of resolution scaling, okay? While median didn't add those drops, and to be honest, there isn't really too much of a difference regarding quality. So this time around, what I do have in here, it is 1080p maximum settings, and I just want to show you very quickly what you can expect on these stairs in here, which is a very demanding place. I do get 45 frames per second. And as soon as I enter in combat in here, what I do get, it is pretty much 40s. Some drops in here to 30s, high 30s. So in case you want to target 30 frames per second, I think your target should be 1080p maximum settings, in case your resolution it is 1080p. If you want to target 60, I would say that median settings with 67% of resolution scaling, it is a good option. But you can also try high settings with 67% of resolution scaling. So let's move on to a different beast this time around. Let's move on to 1440p. And that 1440p median settings over here, resolution scaling, it is stuck to 50, despite I did define in here 57. The reality is that the game is locked to 50%. Which is a little bit more lower than I usually use. What I usually use for the 1440p median, it is 57, and in this case it is 50. In case you are wondering the difference, the 57 that I usually use at median, it is usually 820p, but since the game is locking out at 50, it's essentially 720p upscaled to 1440p and median settings. This does provide for the most part an experience above 60, but yeah, you are seeing it, and in some occasions it does drop below 60. So if you have a variable refresh rate screen, I don't think that's an issue for you. Although if you don't, you can expect to have some drops below than 60. And this is just very typical gameplay. I don't really know how's the performance when it involves a lot of effects like boss fights and stuff like that. I have no idea how I can expect regarding the performance. Now, with 1440p, with 67% of DSR, it's a mixed bag experience. I think it's good if you have a very, very good variable refresh rate screen. but still I'm not so sure if it can hold it up. And if you want to target 30 frames per second, you can have like the 1440p Ultra 99% TSR. Yes, it's true, it's 99%. Still, it can drop below than 30, so you can adjust the TSR to something like 75%. That should help. And well, I guess that's it. So let's move on to other resolutions in here. And of course, there is just one more resolution left. In this case, it is 4K. And despite I have defined it here 50% resolution scaling, the reality is that the game will lock us out at 33, none of the less. So in case you are wondering again, what does this mean? 53, it is pretty much 720p. So essentially what I do feel like is that if you always play at median settings, the game will render internally at 720p. No matter what resolution you are throwing it, the game will lock the upscaling to 720p. Okay, it's not possible to play this natively with your native resolution unless you play at 720p screen. It's not possible to play with native resolution with median settings because it just locks out to 720p. So that's how I think that this works. Okay, I think that this locks down. I've showed you some evidences at the beginning, and that's why some people are a little bit confused about how this game works. I don't think that they should have gone through this route. I don't think that they should have blocked it out. I think they could lock it out, but then you could have a toggle or a warning or something like, are you sure you want to do this? And you could press OK and you unlock that. Or you could have like a toggle saying unlock unrecommended settings for your system. Well, you know, something like that. You shouldn't really lock the people to certain and determined resolution scaling depending on the resolution that you are playing and depending on the setting. It doesn't make too much sense to me. You shouldn't do that, and above all, you should have better documentation on the options menu to really show you that you are being locked out, because it doesn't make sense that you can raise your upscaling solution to 100% when in reality nothing is happening in that sense. So I think that needs to change. Okay, I don't have an issue with them recommending or trying to soft lock certain resolution scaling to certain setting or to certain resolution. But again, I would agree if it was soft locked, if people had the ability to bypass this. Okay, but it's not possible. Even through game user settings, through config files, it's not possible. You can define in there 100%, but still, as soon as you enter the game, you will see 100% on the options menu, but still the game is not rendering at 100%. Okay, so yeah, that's how it goes for Wuchang Fallen Feathers. I just think they need to change that, and you need to address a little bit the traversal stutters or the shader compilation stutters. I'm not really sure what really is going on with those stutters. It's not really the best, or the worst thing I ever seen, but still it's a little bit annoying, and it's not too much excusable, given that the latest versions of Unreal Engine have really progressed a lot regarding the stutters and the tools they have for the developers to catch up the stutters. So yeah, this shouldn't be happening in the first place. But I mean, it's a Chinese game and it's using Unreal Engine, and I do believe it's their first high-profile title. I'm not entirely sure about this. So I think these guys must have excuse. People that doesn't have excuse is developer teams that are experienced and they still put shitty optimized games out there. And they have a team that can leverage very good optimizations, but they always end up not happening. Alright, so with this I'm going to finish up my chit chat in here. I'm going to let you enjoy the rest of the gameplay, and I do hope to see you soon. Goodbye.